Welcome to the Mind, Body and Soul Show with artist, author and personal development coach John Morris. Inspiring, motivating and educating you on your journey to find balance in the craziness of day-to-day life. Learn from and listen to a man who has a wealth of life experience, from business to bodybuilding, artist to author, and has learned to deal with his own physical and mental wellness. But that's not all. Each week, John will be joined by guests from around the world and all walks of life, where they too will share their knowledge and expertise. And now, we welcome you to today's episode of the Mind, Body and Soul Show with your host, John Morris.
Well, good afternoon, folks. I hope you're doing great wherever you are in the world today. Today we are in not so sunny Scotland. We're actually in pouring it down, wet, miserable, stormy Scotland. However, we've got all the studio lights in and everything looks good and we're all ready to rock and roll because that isn't going to dampen our energies. I should welcome you obviously to the Mind, Body and Soul Show where we help you find balance in the craziness of day-to-day life. And as I am always your host, John Morris. And today I'm really excited, as you can probably tell, full of energy, full of beans and vibrant and ready to go, because today we've got one of my absolute favorites to join me on the show today. She's a very, very unique musician. She's an entrepreneur in her own right and one of my favorite creative minds because we have a lot in common, and she's the awesome Ella Harp. And I want to bring Ella in right now. Ella, welcome to the show. How are you doing? Sorry, we lost signal there for slightly. How are you doing today?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
Good. I am doing great. I'm doing great. How's the weather by you?
Today it is cloudy. It is very cloudy, but it's not raining, so I will take that as well.
We had some beautiful weather here over the weekend, which was just absolutely lovely, especially obviously at this time of year where all the trees are changing color and things. And but we have had some severe storms blow through. There've been tornadoes that have actually blown through near where my mum and dad live in southern England. So yeah, there's lots of crazy stuff that's going on here. Ella, for the audience that's never met you before, and obviously we're streaming all over the world right now, so this is really exciting. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up doing what you do.
So I am one of those creative people that can't seem to do anything else. So I funnel that into music primarily, but also into sewing and into knitting and every other creative thing that basically I can find. So I've been playing the harp since I was 8 and the banjo for not quite as long, but I'm a singer-songwriter. So I write music on both of those instruments, which I put out into the world as much as I can. I just released my most recent album back in September called Screaming Into the Void. And otherwise, my creativity just sort of fills the voids of the things that I need. So I designed and made both of my instruments. I make all my clothes. I make whatever other thing seems interesting to me to make at the time. So that's me in a nutshell, I guess. You can see my sewing machine right there.
It's a really incredible nutshell because, you know, a lot of people play guitar, a lot of people play piano or a musical instrument. You not only play them, but you design them yourself, which I've always found fascinating. It's like creativity, you know, version 2, which I just thoroughly love. At what point, and I call it the moment of uniqueness, but what point did you look at the guitar and say, no, I'm not really feeling that. No, I'm not feeling the piano, but I do like the banjo and do like the harp. What was that like for you in that moment?
Well, the harp I didn't really have, not that I didn't have a choice on, but we sort of ended up with a harp in the house from the time I was very small. And my older sister started playing it first. And then I, of course, fell in love with it and took it up as well. So that one was sort of felt built in. But I had come back from college. And again, my sister had cleverly found it first. I stole the banjo from her as well. But she had started playing the banjo, which I just thought was brilliant because the guitar actually has really tough tension. It's actually a lot harder than for me than everybody seems to think that it is anyway. I don't know, just that direction feels really unnatural for me. So the banjo was a great instrument because it felt really happy to me. And even though I write horribly miserable songs on it, but it just felt happy in a sort of way that I enjoyed. So, and also it was small enough that I could, the main reason I designed my harp was because harps are kind of big and awkward. And so I started playing the banjo first because the banjo was a lot smaller than the harp. So it was more convenient for me to travel with.
And it's true. I mean, I remember, I think one of the interviews that you and I did last year when we were talking about the original harp, getting it on and off of the trains. And I identify with that with the 12-string guitar. 12-string guitars obviously double the size of a normal guitar, much bigger, longer neck and everything, and frequently would hit the top of the train as you're trying to get in, which on busy mornings is never it's never good for the safety of your guitar.
No, you're good.
for sure. But I mean, I find it unique, because again, like you, I love playing different instruments. I love doing different things. And I think, you and I have said before, it's great to see something, to see a vision of it, and then be like, okay, it's meant to work in this way.
Right.
But what about if we're trying to do something else with it? And I love that. It's just so exciting. I'm interested as well because obviously you ended up here in Scotland, actually probably about half an hour away from where I am right now. How? Yes, that is the question. How did you end up, or more than why did you end up in Scotland?
Yes, I still ask myself those questions to this day. I'm just kidding. But in the States, if you want to study music, if you want to study harp particularly, it's not there aren't that many people, we'll put it that way, that sort of go into the higher level education for these kinds of things. And when you do, you're going for almost exclusively for classical music. There's also some that do jazz, but that wasn't really either of my areas of expertise. Not that I really had any expertise at all at that point, but you have to, if you're going to go up to the higher education level, and especially with how bloody expensive it is in the States and elsewhere, you better have a good plan to continue on with it. And I just wasn't quite feeling the connection to those kinds of to that kind of music. So I found out about the RSAMD, which formerly the RSAMD, it's now the RCS in Glasgow, which is a music academy where you can learn, the bagpipes or folklore is like a core class. And so it's a bachelor's in traditional Scottish music. And I just thought that sounded delightful. So I applied and I luckily got in. And that was the only place I applied to, the only real vision I had in my head. And thankfully it worked out.
Only in Scotland, and I frequently say this to my wife, but only in Scotland could you take an instrument designed, to kind of deafen people and discombobulate people during war and make it into a musical instrument. We are very, very unique over here, for sure.
Oh, yes.
Ella, how did you find the cultural differences between the United States and the UK? Obviously, we've talked about this before, but it's really intriguing because you're my first really international guest of this expertise. So I'm really interested to hear from your perspective.
Yes, to be honest, I found it rather dramatic. At the time, I was a bit odd by California standards anyway, and I was like a vegan, and then I was a raw vegan, and I didn't drink anything, and then I went on to this very small course. As you can imagine, with the bachelor's in traditional Scottish music, I believe there were about 700 or 800 people in the academy in its entirety at that point. So it was me and 16 other people, and we were the biggest year they'd ever had. So I found it a little bit more shocking than I think I was anticipating. And the weather was, of course, a bit of a challenge. I moved from Los Angeles, which is very, very warm. The sun shines like 300 and something days a year. So it was a bit of a shock to me, but I did survive.
I can imagine. I mean, we probably get the other maybe 50 days of sunshine here where you guys maybe get rain in Los Angeles, but
yeah.
Certainly over here, we haven't seen it recently. But I mean, because I know when I moved from England to Scotland, I found a major culture difference, and that's literally just moving 400 miles up the road. You were traveling 4,000 or 5,000 miles across the sea, over here. Now, Scotland, I guess, has got somewhat of a reputation of being very welcoming and open, to the majority of Americans there. I suppose it depends on the personality. And because from talking with you in other times and other stories that you share with me, I think you and I were very much alike, that we were kind of like fish out of water. And it was like, how do I fit in here? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, I think so much about making these large life changes and putting yourself through something that's going to shift the way that everything runs that much. It kind of depends on where you're at personally in your life at that point. And if I had been, at a personal level of chill that I currently am and moved there, I think it would have been a completely different experience. But I was 19 and I had some health issues going on that I was trying to navigate. And I just was sort of, I think, at probably the worst point that I could have made a big change like that in my life. So that was definitely challenging for me. But I mean, on the plus side, when you move to, a really challenging environment, when you aren't prepared for it, and then you also survive that, then it makes you a stronger person for other changes and things that come your way. So that's what I've mostly focused on, is the sort of positive side of things from that. And, the good news is that you meet people, and then, the internet lets you stay in touch with people. So the cool thing is that now I'm like, that was nice. It's a little harder to feel that way, but I think there's a lot to be said for, being at a place in yourself where you feel like you have, just a better understanding of how you are and who you are, how you interact with people. Because if you don't, you're really putting yourself up for an interesting time.
Yeah, I concur with that fully. I mean, that's the best way that I can say it, because, if you're not in the right headspace for that, I mean, it's going to be, traumatic enough with a transition and everything, and you're trying to adjust to a new culture, a new way of life. And then if you're not in the right headspace for that, it's like, how do I fit into this mold? How do I behave in the way that I'm meant to behave?
Yeah.
And I was exactly the same as you. I mean, I know for a number of years, I was just like, was there anything good that happened in the last decade? And then only when you come out the other side, you're like, actually, there were some really good memories that were there.
Yeah.
It's just at the time you're like, man, this sucks.
Yeah, they take a while. They're not the instant memories.
Well, and that's it, because I think as sometimes as human beings, and again, it depends for your mind and your mental programming things, but we can be more programmed to focus on the negative as opposed to, oh wow, that was really amazing, that was special, and actually remember the good things that were there for sure. So how long were you in the UK?
How long was I there?
Mhm.
I was there for 4 years. So I had just freshly turned 19, and I moved there in September. And then I was there through June of 4 years later. And I was in Glasgow for the first 3 years. So you of course get your BA in 3 years over there. So I finished my BA, and then the fourth year I could have gotten my sort of honors year, which would have been the same sort of thing, but writing a massive dissertation and preparing for a very large performance in front of people. And I was like, no. So as soon as I realized that I did not have to do that, but my visa was for 4 years, I decided to go up to the Isle of Skye and study at Sulmarasig, the little Gaelic college up there.
Wow. What did you study up there?
Gaelic, just Gaelic.
Of course. What else?
Well, I mean, the cool thing about Sulmar is that if you don't speak Gaelic, you can go there to learn it, and if you do speak Gaelic, you can take history, or you can just go to college there as you would but you're through the medium of Gaelic. So obviously wasn't at that level, but I got to be on the Course of Cumish, which is a year-long course designed to take you from basic knowledge to a decent level of fluency, and it was really a blast. But unfortunately, by the time I got there, I was so over everything. I've been there for all these years, and really all I ever wanted visually was to live somewhere like Skye. But by the time I got there, I was just like, okay, I need to go.
Yeah, but by that point, you're just like, I just want to go home.
Yeah, I know.
I get it. And I think sometimes, it can almost sabotage our own enjoyment of it, because we're so focused on what's going on. And like you say, I mean, it goes hand in hand. When you've got the mental health battles or physical health battles, it has a knock-on effect on every other thing that we go through. And then it returns as well, because, things suck in your external world because oftentimes of how you're thinking, how you're feeling. Sure. And then it comes back. And then because of how things are going in your external world, it comes back to you. And then you start thinking more rubbish and just, oh my goodness. And it just goes round and round and round in a big circle, for sure. So I completely get it. So what was it like for you when you went back to the United States? At that point where you're like, I'm home, there's warmth, there's security.
Oh, it was really wonderful. But it was funny because I got back, and when I was in Scotland, I went through all these sort of physical changes that I felt like were necessary, because you're sort of trying to blend in, you're kind of trying to like chameleon in with everything as much as you can. And I cut my hair really short, and I got this fringe, and I wore all these cardigans. And it's funny because I remember the very next day I came home and I was so excited. It was June 20th. I'll never forget. Every year on June 20th, I'm like, yes. Not to make it sound horrible, because it really wasn't. Of course, in hindsight, and I've been back once. It was lovely. I can't wait to go back again. But there's really no way to fix something where when you're in the worst brain state, you can be there. It's like everything can be as wonderful as possible. But if if you don't feel like you have that kind of connection with yourself, then it's always going to be hard.
Yeah.
a love-hate relationship with Scotland. But when I returned, I remember the first day I got up and, I got dressed as I did, and I straightened my fringe, and I put my cardigan on, and I buttoned it up. And I looked in the mirror in Malibu, California, and the mirror was like, oh, no. No. And then the mirror in Scotland told me I looked fine for 4 years, and suddenly Malibu was like, no, no, you got to do something about that. It was very funny. So the hair grew out, and the cardigans went in the storage, and it was funny.
It's always one of the funny things that, like you said, we try to blend into our society. I think, and like you said there, when you're in that mental state and that mental place, there's already a lot of things going on, a lot of adjustments. You almost just want to sit there, almost like with your jacket over your head kind of thing, so nobody notices you. And when you're a performer, such as yourself or such as myself, and people are saying, come on, you need to do this, you've got this show to do, you've got this to do, and you're sitting there thinking, can I do it just sort of like this, But it's I don't know about you now, but I still find to this day, because we had this a couple of weeks ago with one of the shows where I was just like, I'm just not feeling this today. And then as soon as the white light goes on, it's just like you click into this other character. It's so bizarre.
Oh, yeah.
And it's wonderful at the same point. And all of that stuff just goes away, and it's just, it becomes easy. But I don't know where I'm going with that, but it all sounds good.
You're right.
But I think a lot of the time, you're almost conflicted in your emotions, because you were doing performances over here, were you not, on where you were busking and trying to make ends meet, as many students do. And I have busked once, I believe. Now, I'm assuming you guys in the States know what we mean by busking and around the world, but if you don't, it means playing on the street, being a street performer, musician, putting your creative talent out there so as, people will pay you. It's that simple. And, I've done it once, and it was terrifying. You had people coming up to you and paying you compliments. And at that point, I was like, how do I respond to this? It's very, very strange. And again, as you've said to me before, you would do it on nights like tonight, where it's dark, it's cold, it's raining, just to try and make it or make ends meet. So kudos for you for actually staying and sticking with it and getting through the whole thing. But I can imagine when you got back to the States, it was like, okay, what do I do now? And what did you do after you got back to the States?
Well, I was in my third year. I was trying to figure out what I was going to do when I got back. I remember sitting in my friend's flat in Glasgow, and I was sort of house sitting. It seemed like a good deal. It's like, oh, hey, you want to hang out in my flat for, you can stay in my flat. I was like, oh, great. Then it was like, oh, by the way, we lost the keys, so you can't leave because the door locks, and you can't not lock the door. So you're gonna have to stay here. You can't go anywhere. If it's 3 days, you'll have a great time. And so I was sitting, sort of stuck in this very quaint little flat. And I was really starting to piece things together, because at this point, I had a little over a year left, and I was contemplating what I was going to do as soon as I got back to California. But I had this sort of moment where I was going through Craigslist, which is our, sort of, I think it's Gumtree over there or something, but it's where you have, you can look for places to live or things for sale and all that kind of stuff. So I was digging around through Craigslist trying to find places to live in the area that I wanted to live in, which is where I live currently, which is this lovely little town called Half Moon Bay. It's sort of a little beach town that's south of San Francisco. But it's not the cheapest place in the world to live because there's an ocean right there. And it was a tricky sort of thing, because I was looking at all these rents and the prices that I was going to have to pay for rent, and realizing that I essentially was either going to have to make a lot more money and get a real job, or I was going to have to in some way drastically decrease the cost of my existence. And so I had looked at that website, and in my avoidance tactics, I went on to some other site, and there was a link to a video about, the title was "See a Man Who Lives in 120 Square Feet." And I was like, and I clicked on that, and I watched the video, and then I went to the website, and 15 or so minutes later, I was like, yep, that'll do it. So it was tiny houses, and you build them on little tiny trailers, and they're on wheels, so you can drive the thing around. And so I called my parents. It was 2 a.m, and my sister, and I was like, hey guys, I'm going to move home. I'm going to build a house on a trailer. They're like, what? Because I never built anything, not anything at all, not a thing, not even a bookshelf, not a one. So it was a rather, sort of dramatic statement, but it was the only thing I could see that would really make sense for me to exist in the sort of way that I wanted to, because, I just gone through all this trouble. It's you know, it was cheaper probably than going in the States, but it's still, you know, pretty expensive as an international student traveling abroad, especially because the pound to dollar ratio was horrible, horrible at that time. So it was, you know, made the most sense for sort of what I was going for. So I moved home and I basically immediately started planning for, and then I went to a workshop for, and then bought the trailer for, and then started building this tiny house. So I built a house on a 7 by 18 foot, 120 square foot, you know, trailer. And I built my little house on there. So it took me about a year, and I lived at my parents' house in Southern California, and then drove it up here and found a place to put it, and everything sort of worked out. And I've been through a few different living situations since then, but I still have my tiny house, and it still increases my, my greater happiness and financial situation in life because it's rented out now. So that was sort of my way of dealing with everything. And it, and then music sort of became, you know, more towards the forefront. I played weddings for a while and other things like that. And then I sort of departed from music for a while, and I worked for the tiny house company and taught people how to teach. So I took workshops on how to build tiny houses for a couple of years, which was really fun. And then music sort of slowly just came back into the forefront. And then before I knew it, I was like, oh, I should start singing the songs that I've written, which was funny because that's not something I really did. And then before you knew it, it was just snowballing into, I have to make an album, and then I have to make another one, and all the other sort of ways that your passion drives you more so than you driving yourself in the passion.
It's one of the crazy things I want to touch on just before we go to commercial, because you will understand this, I think, in a way that few others will. When we last spoke, I think I was talking to you about book ideas and stuff that I was working on. Well, that's now very much in motion. The first book is written and the second book is almost finished. It's going through all the editing process just now, and it's set for release next November 2022. But the crazy thing is, I'm now looking at my board, and this is one of 13 in a series, and it's just getting bigger and bigger. And this entire thing is just growing every single day. The artwork's growing every single day. And I get it. It's just like you have this tiny idea that starts out as a mustard seed, and it explodes. You and I have obviously put CDs together. You've worked in a recording studio before. I've done it here. You know, I just did it in the apartment and whatnot, and in the house. And I get it. It's one of the most exciting, rewarding things I think I've ever been a part of, when you have the idea and then all of a sudden, months or maybe years later, and you see it all to come to fruition. What was that like for you the first time that happened?
Oh, I mean, it's happened in a lot of different iterations for me, I suppose, because I've sort of taken an idea and made it into something. What's funny is that, you know, the tiny house was definitely the first large anything. The very small house was the largest thing that I had ever done. But I had a few little sort of touch points that I could pull out from things that I had done, that I had accomplished in the past, that gave me the confidence that I could do this thing that I had never done before, that was much huger than I thought. And I think the first one that I did, the first sort of feeling of this that I remember having distinctly, was I had previously tried to sew a lot. Like hand sewing, or try to use a machine, but every time I touched it, my sister said it broke. And so she's like, you'll never sew, you can't, it's for, I hate you. So I would hand sew things, and I would just rush through everything. And I skipped all the, you know, steps that you're supposed to do. And I would be like, I just want to get it done, you know, and I wouldn't plan anything. I would rush so quickly through something that it would basically just be totally terrible, as you would expect. And I tried that for many years, for a really, really long time. And eventually, at one point when I was in college, I was like, I really wish I could sew. And my brain was like, well, you can't, because you're garbage at it. And then the other part of my brain was like, well, yeah, but you know that you're garbage at it, mostly because you just steam plowed through everything. You didn't take any time for anything. You know, as you were doing it, you knew, like, that's probably not a good idea. You're like, keep going. Nobody will notice. But of course, you know, if I had just stopped and taken the time to look at those things. Yeah. So what I decided was, at that point, I was like, this time I'm going out and I'm buying the fabric and I'm buying the thread and I'm doing the things. But this time I'm not going to rush through everything. I'm not going to wreck it. This time I'm just going to go slowly, and I'm going to fix everything that comes up. And I'm just not going to stop until I have a dress, something that looks like an actual dress, like I can actually wear. And it took me quite a while, and it was really hard, you know, to go through the mindset of being like, nope, you have to stop. You have to take it back. That's terrible. You did a bad job. But once I made it through that, I made this dress, and I was like, well, I can do anything now. And that was genuinely how my mindset worked. So when I went to build a house, I was like, I can do it, because I made this dress once, and the dress turned out fine. Because it was that mindset change more than anything. But in terms of for music and sort of the creativity kind of thing, I think of that more as being the driving force behind it. Like, I think people think of passions, and I used to think of passions as something that you want to do. And so it's this kind of calming thing that you just do. And I have some things in my life that are like that. Like sewing is very calming for me now. But music and sort of that drive isn't really calming at all. It's very stressful, actually. And it's not really something, I mean, I obviously want it to happen, but it's not really something that I'm sort of choosing to do on a daily basis. It's more so that it's just like, I like to describe it as somebody's chasing you up the stairs with a pair of scissors. It's like, you just have to go, you know, you can't stop because there's a scissor man. Very bad analogy, but you know what I mean.
It's the first time I've ever heard anybody as a recording artist put it quite like that, you know, which is always good. And always, but I get it. You know, when I was writing the book, the first in the series, I sat down, and 11 days later, the first lot was pretty much done, you know, from start to finish. And I was just like, again, I had nothing to do with it. I sat down, and it was almost like I was just channeling this stuff through me. And it's one of the most exciting, wonderful experiences of my life. Now, I went through some major changes since we've spoke last year, this year, which was just phenomenal. And it really has changed my entire outlook on life and so much more. And I think when you start seeing things a little bit more, I don't chase these things anymore. I just sort of sit down and I listen, and then I just let them happen, and, you know, away we go. So I get it. It's like something you want to see happen desperately, but it's like, okay, I'm on the roller coaster. Here I go, folks. We'll, you know, see where we end up, which is always interesting. Before we continue, folks, we are going to head to commercial. We'll be back with you in a couple of minutes. And if you've got questions for Ella or myself, drop them in the comment section below, and we will get to them hopefully during the course of the show. So we will see you in a moment or two.
Hello and welcome to the Los Angeles Tribune. Since 1886, our name has been a part of the world of journalism. We have earned a reputation for being a publication that practices integrity, authenticity, and responsibility. For general inquiries, contact today. Thank you on behalf of the Los Angeles Tribune team.
It's that time of year again! A time of lights, trees, and presents galore. It's also a time filled with stress, worry, and frantic panic in the search for that special gift. What do you buy the person who has everything? The answer, you buy them something that can't be found on the high street or in any shop, but only by special order. You buy them something made with love. Through the power of a paintbrush and the magic of some paint, I create paintings for people from all over the world and in all shapes and sizes. Portraits, pets, landscapes, seascapes, and so much more. Just like Santa, I too love to spread the gift of joy to people all over the world. Christmas can be an immensely stressful time of year. Will they like it? Won't they like it? Well, when you order with us, you're ordering something that your loved one is guaranteed to love. We take all the stress away for you. It is as simple as 1, 2, 3. Send an email with the picture you desire. Choose the size and frame of your choosing, and we will take care of the rest. Shipping is even on us. And if you're looking for something even more unique, why not come and visit our online shop, where you can order my best-selling self-help book, which is packed with my artwork. Why not even order my CD, and even prints and gift certificates and so much more awaits behind those doors. So what are you waiting for? Come and visit us and click on that link. We're looking forward to hearing from you and helping in any way that we can. And from all of us here, we wish you a very, very Merry Christmas. Okay, folks, we are back and welcome back to the Mind, Body and Soul show. Today's special guest, of course, is Ella Harp, and we're talking all things music, entrepreneurship, and so much more with Ella. But just before we jump back into our conversation with Ella, I want to let you guys know that we have got still some sponsorship places available. If you're interested in sponsoring the show, then you can get in touch with us. Either directly drop me a message in the comment section below or head to thejohnmorris.co.uk. If you've got a product, if you've got a brand or a message or something you want to get out there, then get in touch on the LA Tribune network. The show goes out to over 50 million homes over the Roku TV network. What better place to get your message out there and in a more phenomenal way than with this very show? And it keeps us on the air. So get in touch. With that in mind, let's bring Ella back in and let's continue our awesome conversation. Ella, welcome back.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. So when we finished talking, obviously before the commercial, we were talking about all things, moving to Scotland and the, enjoyment that you have of creating music and how it's like literally being chased up the stairs by a person with scissors, which I thoroughly love. But one of the things that I love about you is not only your musical side, but is not only your tiny house building, which I love. We watched a documentary, my wife and I, all about that, and it was over, I don't know, a series of 12 episodes or something. And some of the tiny houses are actually really big inside, which is just phenomenal. And it's just like, how do you guys get that amount of stuff into such tiny space? I thoroughly love it. And it's becoming more of the, I suppose, the norm for younger people that are struggling to obviously make ends meet, which I'm sure we'll circle back to later on in the show. But I want to talk to you about your world of fashion, because you create your own clothes majority of the time. Talk to us a little bit about that and when you first started to do that and to notice, maybe I really want to, explore this a little bit more.
Well, as I mentioned, my sister was sort of the sewer of the family, and she would design these very fashionable things when she was like 6, 7 years old, and she would actually make them, and they were very good for a child, for a very small human. And so she always had this very sort of creative tilt in that direction for sewing. And I was always very impressed with the things that she would make. And I tried, as I mentioned many times, and I failed miserably every time until I was 19 or 20 or so, maybe in college. And I decided this time I'm just going to make this one dress and it's going to work. And that was sort of a shift in the mindset where, I think I was always pretty preoccupied in the concept of having talent at something. Like you either have talent at something or you don't have talent at something. Like I'm lucky to have some talent in musical directions. And I know that I have creative tendencies, but my creative tendencies don't make me good at any of those things in particular. It's just that I sort of have this desire to be better at them and sort of keep working at them. But sewing was one of the later things that I really, I was bad at for so long, and it was hard to argue that it was anything other than bad because they were really bad, and you can't wear these things, when they fall apart. If it's a bad piece of art, you put it up on the wall and it doesn't look very good, but it's not like it's physically falling apart at the seams. So sewing was a hard one to fake for me. But eventually I just kind of kept, from that one singular dress onwards, I kept making different things and designing things. And I'm the kind of person that cannot follow recipes or patterns or anything. That the concept of that is just completely, sounds horrible to me. So I just, it would be a lot easier. I'm certain it would. But instead I just think of something and I just see something in my head and I go, oh, and I just start, basically my take on things for fabric, for house building, for everything is just cut it till it fits. So that was my start into the sort of sewing world. So I would make things bigger than I needed them to be and then just sort of cut things around and make them work in some general way. But I hand sewed my clothes for many years. And then in the end of 2015, I finally got a sewing machine. And then that has been really sort of the start of my actual being able to actually sew and making things for people, because previously they'd be like, oh, you're wearing this thing. You're like, I made it. And they're like, I know. And it's not necessarily a good thing, but going forward now, it's sort of that same thing, but it's the opposite side, because now I actually design things and I make things, and I sort of have like almost like a way about my clothes, and people are like, oh, you must have made that. I'm like, oh, I did. So eventually that comes back around and it's a good thing. So gratefully, I feel like I'm at that point these days, but it's wonderful because when you can, sewing is one of those things that, it can be not very fun at all, because you're just, if you're making basic things or if you're making things that you don't use or what have you, it's just, it's just kind of going through the motions. But the way I sort of decided to take it into my life was, it was that sort of making my existence as inexpensive as possible. And unfortunately, I used to live in Malibu next to all these fancy stores. And of course, I worked on a horse ranch and shoveled up poop. So it wasn't like I had a lot of money to spend on these things, but I would save and I would spend everything that I had on all of these fancy clothes because I was so excited by them. And it was very expensive. It was not a cheap hobby. So I think sort of getting into the design side of things and making my own version of everything not only gives me, a way to more cheaply go at all this stuff, but it gives me what I'm actually, what I'm actually looking for. So it gives me sort of more of a personal connection with my existence in that way. That's also a lot cheaper. So take it when it comes. But I've got a fat stack of fabric over there, and I go shopping by going and looking at my fabric stash and picking out what I'm going to make for whatever thing, and it's quite delightful.
See, I find it interesting though, and a lot of people, can call it weird or what they like, but as we're going to circle into, I suppose, in a moment, the world is changing, and people are having to basically figure out how to repair what they already have. Because they're talking about that with laptops and electronics and certain plastic, technological items and all the other things that are there, that if it breaks, you need to figure out a way to fix it. And companies, certainly over here in the UK, I don't know about in the United States, but are actually being charged by law that if it breaks within 5 years, 10 years, and you have sold it, then the company needs to take responsibility and actually repair it. Now, we've got Dell computers over here. Don't know if I meant to say that on air, but hey, it's my show. I can do what I like. Where everything is factory sealed, which means if you need a repair, they need to do it specifically. That's great. But now they're one of the companies, again, under scrutiny, that's being forced to, redo this because they're trying to really reduce the amount of waste that, is going out into the world, which I think is a fantastic thing. And what you've described there is, I think, an absolute perfect example of, hey, the world is changing. Maybe it will circle back, as it always does, to a point where you need to mend your slippers. You need to mend your shoes, as opposed to just throwing them away and buying a new pair. What are your thoughts regarding, I suppose, the world and how do you make sense of it all? I know this is a really big question. Probably, it's like, okay, where do we start with this? But how do you make sense of, I suppose, the stuff that's going on in the world right now? And you can pick whatever topic you want to answer that one from.
Yeah, what's nice is that amongst, it's such a section, I think, of extremes right now, where, the consumerism is obviously at really terrifying levels, and, it's planned obsolescence and all those kinds of things. And, sort of along the lines of what you were talking about, it's like, things can only be fixed by the factory, and they physically put things so that other people that don't have some specific tool that you can't buy, can't actually fix those things. And it's like, so in the world where those kinds of things are happening all the time, I think there's also such a resurgence of people that are realizing that if they take a few steps to change some of their circumstances or to shift the way that they do something, they can make their own bread, they can make their own clothing, they can grow their own food and things like that. And I think, obviously people have always done that, but there's definitely, I think what is helping right now is that there's a few different things that are making that like cool again, which is helpful. And I think that, the kind of social media apps and TikTok and Instagram and all those kinds of things, and this whole cottagecore world that I don't know if you've seen the hashtags for, but it's funny. It's actually really funny. It's great because it's getting people to actually, do things and make things and kind of go out in their frilly dresses in the woods and such. But it's kind of glorifying the concept of simpler living. And so that aspect of it is really great because, baking your own bread and making things that you have around you and sort of, it's a good start anyway. It's definitely good to kind of get people back into the concept of being more connected to the things that they have, and also having built, a tiny house in the sort of world of the tiny house movement, if you will, and then the sort of minimalism that ties onto that, and a lot of other different aspects of things is good. And there's a lot of like capsule wardrobe people that are trying to. And of course, it's all still, it's all still marketing, and it's all still trying to sell things to people. But the good part about it is that at least it's somewhere in, sort of the periphery these days. Like maybe you just need 3 of those things, and maybe you don't need 12, or maybe you just want to have the things around you that you really genuinely like, and maybe you don't need to have all the other things around, which is sort of how I've approached my everything. I live in my space is probably about 350 square feet at this point, so it's twice as big. I've doubled up in life. But it's real small, and that's not 300 square feet. It's not a big space. So, I move into my big house and I'm like, I can have so much shit now. And then of course I can't, because it's 300 square feet and I'm swimming in it. So, it's sort of a constant process. But what I like about making things is that you have a different sort of connection to them. And what's nice is that once you get creative with something, and this is something that happened throughout history, in historical fashion forever, is you have something and then the fashion changes and you go, well, I'm just going to have to turn this into something else.
Yeah.
And, that sort of level of reusing things is really helpful. And the nice thing is that once you've made something, you don't just necessarily, when you've really taken a lot of time for something, you don't just throw that in the pile to go to the charity shop. That's something that you hold on to that because you made that thing that took you a long time. And so if you can take, that, and if it doesn't serve you anymore, then you can sort of take it apart. And what I like about sort of getting into the more creative side of things is that it makes you start thinking about things, differently in a lot of different ways. Like, if there's something you want to get rid of, it's like, well, why do you want to get rid of it? Maybe it's like I had this skirt or this dress once that I bought when I was visiting my friend in Belgium, and it was beautiful and I liked it, but it's like, well, I never wear this thing. And so I was like, well, I should get rid of it. And that, because that's the sort of mindset that you have. It's like, we probably shouldn't have it anymore, at least in the minimalism mindset that I was in at the time. And then I was like, well, why don't I like it anymore though? Because it's really nice fabric and all these things. And I was like, well, it makes me look like a mushroom. I was like, well, great. Then maybe I should just change that. And so I cut it and took it apart and turned it into a skirt, and it turned much better than it was as a mushroom dress. And, it's that sort of way of taking something and finding a new life for it, where you get to feel, instead of like, well, this is this thing and I'm just going to, shove it off to the side, where you can actually take something and you can make it more useful to you. You can identify what it is that's not working, and then you can use your creative brain to solve that problem and make it something that does work for you. And that is a really fun way about it. So I'm hoping that people will, the more creative they get with things, the more they start using that side of their brains, hopefully they can, start solving problems with it. Because I think that using your brain to solve problems, however small in your existence, the creative side is just so good at coming up with these little solutions to things, and it can be so fulfilling. So hopefully people can move more in that direction.
And I love that. And I mean, there's so much to pull out of that. I mean, 2 things in particular. When people say to me that they're not creative, again, in my line of work, I always challenge that. I'm like, can you imagine something? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, right, imagine it. And that's you being creative. That's all creativity is. Then it's just figuring out how to do it. You hit on something I think that's really important for people to know as well, that everything that you see in your external world first started as a thought. So I'm surrounded by speakers and I'm surrounded by the printer and screen. That all started as a thought. The thought was there of, how do I fix this problem? Screens, and Ella, you and I are of that age where we will remember the big PC screens from years ago that took up, 3/4 of your desk and weighed an absolute ton. And then they were like, okay, we need to get something that's more compact, something that's better, something that looks nice, and that doesn't weigh a ton. Let's create flat screens. And, that's how we ended up with that. Same with studio lights and everything else. So it all started basically as, how do we solve this problem? And that's all it is being creative. And then, like Ella was saying with her CDs, she's putting her stories, her music out there into the world. She's putting her clothing out there into the world. Not only because it makes her feel good, but also as an act of service to other people. And exactly the same thing that I do, and the same thing that so many people around the world do as well. So I think, personally, I get, everything is marketing. I think if it's done and it's done right and it's done well, it can be really effective. The problem that we've got, unfortunately, is that so many people have obviously used it for their own ends and basically to get as much money into their own back pocket as possible. And now obviously that's coming back to bite them, and it's like, interesting, for sure. So the world is definitely changing. I know we're seeing a lot of stuff that's going on right now with COVID and all the stuff. I don't know how it is for you guys right now. I keep getting reports pretty much from every person in most states every week saying that there's a mandate coming in the United States, that people are walking out, and it's a really crazy time. So how are you coping with everything that's going on right now?
The good thing about being somebody that, is creatively minded and works from home and doesn't really have to go out and do too terribly many things. Not a whole lot has changed super dramatically for me. I mean, obviously, when not being able to play gigs was a massive change, and that was very weird, and that was definitely an experience that lasted for quite a while there. But ever since, I'd say probably about this summer, gigs have come back again. I did a very small, but still, a little tour for my album that came out, and I'm playing gigs across the city and going and kind of moving around and doing things like that. And I'm very grateful that those are around. And, from my perspective, it's sort of like, you just need to do whatever you need to do to keep doing the things that you want to do. So thankfully, if at the gigs that I'm playing, if people have to wear masks, it's like, well, it's really odd. It's definitely odd. It's what's weird is that, you get so much of your audience response, and so much of you gauge everything, by people's faces, and you gauge everything from seeing people and from.
And all you can see is this.
I know. And you're like, are they smiling? Are they flipping me off with their tongues? What are they doing? You have no idea. Are they saying my feet? You have no idea. And it's definitely different, but I'm just so grateful that I'm able to do it, that it's, sort of, it's like, whatever you got to do, it's a weird time frame. And, hopefully everything will sort of settle into some kind of something with all this, but it's definitely a challenge. So I just keep making things. I just stay in here and I make stuff and I play music when I can.
How did it affect you from a professional standpoint then, obviously, because you're the first person I've spoken to where obviously this had a major effect. How did it affect you, and how did you kind of look at it and say, okay, I can't do gigs right now, so what can I do?
Yeah, that was really scary. I mean, for COVID was very odd for me because on February 19th, which was obviously I think everything here shut down on the 15th. On the 9th, between the 9th and the 11th, I lost every gig that I had planned for.
Wow.
It wasn't like there were a ton of them. I'm not that ahead of planning, but I mean, every single thing that I had for the entire year was canceled within 2 days, obviously. And then on the 15th, everything shut down. And actually I didn't get the message in time. I drove to a gig on March 11th. And it was at this little hospital over in San Mateo. And I drove over there and I walked in and I was like, where's this person or where's this thing? And they were like, oh, that got canceled. And I was like, thank you. And I got my car. It was a crazy time. But right before that, so on February 19th, so just a few weeks before, I was recording basically the second half of my album and everything was fully completed. And I was driving back from Southern California, and I was very early in the morning, and I got in this crazy, crazy car accident, and I ended up hitting a guardrail going like 70 miles per hour, and my brakes locked when I turned this corner. It was a series of bizarre events that I really still have no idea quite what happened, but I ended up running into this guardrail at 70 miles per hour, and my car flipped over at least once, and then, I ended up getting hit by another car while I was still inside the car because I was in the middle of the road and my truck was completely totaled. And I was physically essentially unharmed, which was crazy because, that kind of thing should, however you want to look at it, have completely killed me and also potentially many other people if, that woman that had hit me in a different way, or if she'd been going faster or anything like that. But it was odd for me because I just come out of this really weird experience where you're you're physically fine. So it's like nothing's different and everybody just sees you and they're just like, hi. And you're like, hi. But mentally it was just so weird. And I went to work the next day because I wasn't sure what to do, but it's like, it was just really jarring and sort of awkward to have gone through that. And in a lot of ways, I'm grateful that I did, because when there was about a week and a half, and it was one of my biggest gigs that I'd had, was for this Noise Pop Festival in San Francisco, which is sort of local festival kind of thing, and I got to play in this really cool venue and I got to open for these really cool people, and it was super, super exciting. But for that week I had to drive a car and I had to show up places and I had to pretend like I was a normal person that could drive and show up places and talk and do all the things. And I wasn't feeling like that on the inside at all. And all I wanted to do was just hide under a set of blankets for a really long time. I just didn't want to do anything. And it was hilarious because it's not hilarious because it's a global pandemic, but it was interesting. It was ironic timing for me because I didn't want to do anything. And the world was just like, hey, here's a global pandemic. You don't have to do anything for 2 years. And I was like, thank you so much. So it was weird for me because, when the pandemic first happened, I was just like, great, good, take it all away. I don't want to deal with any of this. Yeah. And it's sort of my healing from my car accident and my dealing with the COVID, everything was sort of wrapped up in one. And I'm almost grateful for the timing because, it hit me less hard in both ways because I was recovering from this car accident, but also you can't go anywhere. It's like, we can't go anywhere, but also I don't want to go anywhere. So it was interesting for me, but yeah, it was hard. And but I mean, also it's so funny because, I crashed my car and it was not a great truck. I mean, I love the truck. I love the thing, but they gave me like a totally unreasonable amount of money for this vehicle that was so much more than I ever would have sold it for. And it was funny because that's how I survived the pandemic. Was if I didn't get in a car accident and if they didn't give me more money than my car was worth, then I don't know how. I mean, I would have had to have really made changes, and because of that, I could just kind of exist, and it was really as good as it could be, I guess. I did a lot of knitting. Therapy. Knitting therapy.
Very interesting, the sequence of events for sure. And, like you were saying there, I mean, it was a very strange time for certain. I know for me, actually, and I've told people this numerous times on different shows and interviews, it's actually one of the best years of my life, because I didn't see the majority of people. I wrote my first book during that, and that's what triggered all of these, amazing, divine, life-transforming changes.
Right.
So for me, I looked at it as, okay, we have to stop filming now, a project that I was working on. Similar to yourself, what do I do now? I wasn't in a car accident, but in my mind, I was like, okay, we need to go into, another gear, and we need to find clients to do paintings for.
Mm-hmm.
Within, I don't know, 6 weeks, we had £10,000 worth of paintings, which was the highest small term or short term paycheck, basically, if I can call it that we had at that point. And I was like, wow, that was really awesome. And then it just continued to build from there. So, what you shared with me there, I mean, you can call it divine, you can call it blessing. The fact that you were safe and nothing happened, I'm very thankful about that. And also, that because of that, as a knock-on effect, you were able to survive, global pandemic, where people literally were, going crazy and insane.
Becoming homeless and dying. Yeah, it's crazy. It's weird because, it feels odd to look at something that on a global scale is this disastrous and have had any positive outcome from it.
Mm-hmm.
But, you just have to, I guess, count your blessings and be grateful for it because, so many people's existence was not at all like that. But it was definitely an interesting time frame for the reasonably unaffected artists among us because you have to come up with something. You have to pick something and you have to start doing it. And songwriting didn't really come during that time frame. I didn't really get much real inspiration. But one of the things I've been putting off like crazy was like marketing, and Spotify and social media and all these things, which are, arguably really important. And so I just sat on my computer and just, learned how to market stuff and learned how to run Facebook ads and do all those things. And it definitely, I like to see people I like to see all the different ways that creative people found one thing that was going to make their existence better on the other side. And it's cool. It's cool to witness what all those different things were, even if mine wasn't strictly in creativity, although I did have a lot of sweaters.
But, it's the interesting thing. I mean, you've now got a product line then that when it comes to, designing your website and putting those out there, it's just like, guys, we can do this and things. For me, it was a bizarre thing. I was in the middle of a business meeting one Thursday night, and I sat there and I was like completely disengaged from what they were saying. But I thought, what can I do? The whole idea of Buddhism is to alleviate suffering, and that was a quote by the Buddha. And I sat there, and this just kept rattling around in my brain. I think I'd heard it several years before. It just kept rattling around in my brain. And I said, well, do the thing that you used to do. Go back to entertaining people and, do it online. So that's what I would do every single Thursday night for about 3 months. I would stand here and do mini concerts. I then remastered my compilation, or I actually created a compilation CD from the 3 CDs that I'd done. And I put that out, and it had sold out so quickly. And I was just like, damn, that's really, and it was just another way to, get another income stream, that was there. And I've heard a number of stories like that of people basically transitioning to survive. And it's a testament to the, human spirit and the will to survive, which is fantastic. Ella, we've got a couple of minutes left, but just as we're wrapping up, what's next for you going forward?
Ooh, so many things. Well, first, I'm going to make a dress today, and I'm so excited. I've already got it figured out in my head. It's going to be teal colored. It's going to be very long. It's going to go great with my red boots. I'm so stoked.
Very cool.
But in terms of greater things that are happening, I'm sort of well, first I'm recording my next album, so that's exciting. So I should have more music coming soon. That'll hopefully be out next year, and then also I'm kind of constantly trying to find ways for my creative side of things to kind of come into my music side, for those things to meld, and more so than making things for other people, which I find to be a skill set that's a lot different than making things for myself. I've been trying to kind of get patterns made up or be making videos for instructional things for how to do things. I'm trying to document the things that I make, which historically speaking, when your method is cut it till it fits and you're trying to explain that to somebody, that's helpful actually. It's like, hey, get this fabric, throw it over your shoulder, and then, it's like, that doesn't make sense to people. So I'm trying to come up with ways that I can at least document my creations in such a way that somebody they could reproduce it in their own way. So I'm trying to figure out making patterns for things and things like that. So I've been making more YouTube videos of things that I've created, and of course putting the music behind it, and just kind of trying to find this balance of how that all is going to play out, combining all of my interests into one little thing.
I love it. I really, really do. And it's so exciting. I think because both of us are, not starting out at the same point, but we're both aware of what's going on and what's happening. And it's just incredible to see what you're putting out and what other creative minds are putting out as well. And I thoroughly thought, because it inspires me, and the amount of times people come and say, well, John, you're the inspiration for us. And I'm like, yeah, but your post, last week or whatever inspired me then to do something similar.
Totally.
And that's it just all goes round, and it's a fantastic thing. Ella, where can people find you on social media?
They can find me everywhere as it's ellaharp.com. It's at ellaharp on Instagram and Facebook, and it's ellaharp, which was one word. So you can find me all the places.
That's really, really awesome. And of course, guys, you can find me at thejohnmorris.co.uk. We've got a new website, so I keep having to check it. And you can check me out, obviously, on our new Instagram page at thejohnmorris. You can find me there. Ella, a couple of minutes left. Is there anything that you want to throw in, last-minute thoughts, anything we haven't covered?
Oh, well, I would like to throw out things for people if they would like to become creative, or if they would like to do something with their creative brain and they're not quite sure where to start. So I'm making this up as I go. This was not planned. I'm talking out my bum here, but I think if you were to try, or if you were to want to do something creative, I would start by thinking about the things that you are passionate about, or the things that you care about. Like, what is something that you like and you have in your existence that makes you feel happier? And I would also think of something in your life, anything in your life that you've made that you felt proud of. The great thing about humans is that when we've made something, we're really, generally speaking, we're pretty proud of it. If you see something and somebody says they made it, it's like, oh, that's, that that's a special level of connection that person has with that thing. So think about something that you are passionate about. Think about something that you've made, and start turning your creative brain and thinking about some way that you could either make something else or take the skill set that you use for that thing that you made and either make another one or make something different, and tie that into what you care about. Because when creativity works best is when you pair it with something that you're really excited about. I think that one of the greatest things in my life, and one of my favorite reasons that I love being creative, is because there are literally nights where I'm so excited about the thing I'm going to make the next day that I can't even sleep. And I'm just sitting there and I'm thinking about it, and it's so exciting. So I would encourage people to start coming up with ways that they can take things they're passionate about and things that they've made, and make their creative brain come up with some kind of melding between those, and see what you can come up with, because it's always fun to combine your passions with your own body's ability to create.
I absolutely love that. I think that's a fantastic way to finish off the show. It is, couldn't put it better myself. So it was absolutely brilliant. And folks, definitely come out and check Ella out. Obviously, you can check out her new CD. I believe it's out now. Is it, Ella?
It is, yes. It's called Screaming Into the Void, and you can find it on all the streaming things. And you can also get it on Bandcamp, which is the downloadable files that pays the artist directly, or you can get it physically on my website. I'm also coming up with an actual physical album, like a 12-inch record that's going to.
That's so cool.
So excited about it. So you can find those things and some of my merch at ellaharp.com.
That is brilliant. I'm still struggling at the moment getting my compilation CD up back onto the website because now we're changing things around. So I completely get it. It should be ready, folks, in time for Christmas. But definitely check out Ella's stuff. Obviously, you can come and check out our stuff. Lots of stuff for Christmas, and you supporting creative minds as well. And it means we can continue to do other awesome stuff. Ella, it is. As always, it's been a pleasure to do the show with you, and I hope we get to do it again down the road. But thank you so much. And folks, thank you so much for watching. As always, don't forget to come and check us out and let the Tribune know that you enjoyed the show. And until next time, take care, God bless, and we will see you soon. Have a great one, guys.